Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have a single story with 8 updates compilation for you that we previously had on the channel in 3 separate videos. The Karma Stories podcast is published to all major podcasting platforms, and you can also read along on YouTube under the @Karma Stories podcast handle. Alright, on to this epic saga. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Sacred Weakness 6250. Am I the butthole for jumping out of the way when my niece and nephew tried to push me into a pool, resulting in them falling in? Happened today. My folks decided to host a barbecue because I guess that's what older people do. I declined because I really don't like my 2 sisters, their husbands, or their kids. Wife and I are child-free. Mom then pressured the wife. Long story short, we went. By the time we arrived, there were about 20 people there. My sisters and their husbands were already solidly buzzed. Drunk, really. My mom was spending 100% of her time trying to keep the nieces and nephews ages 7 to 11 more or less under control. My dad had strategically retreated to the whirlpool part of the pool with a small cooler full of beers. Wife and I made small talk with miscellaneous people, ate food, and had a frozen margarita. Sisters and brother-in-laws took turns criticizing us for being late, not being in our swimsuits, and screwing up the vibe. Whatever, typical suburban summer get-together. About 45 minutes in, 2 of the kids ran at one of the neighbor guests who was standing next to the pool and pushed her in. She was at the pool steps, stumbled in, but didn't fall, so only got half wet. She was clearly very unhappy about it, but she didn't make a scene. Just went over to where the parents were, grabbed their towels, dried herself off, and left. Sisters and brother-in-laws thought it was all great fun. A bit later, I was standing a few feet away from the pool, chatting away with someone. I saw 3 of the kids running full tilt at me from the corner of my eye. Obviously, I was next. Not that it's terribly difficult to outwit young kids, but I just jumped out of their way at the last second. All 3 of them ran straight into the pool at full speed. Most of the other guests, including my wife and me, started laughing, but their moms, who as I mentioned were pretty crap-faced, absolutely freaked out. Apparently, 2 of the kids couldn't swim, even though they were in swimsuits. Since I wasn't in swim gear, I stepped back from the pool and let other people fish the kids out. The kids were bawling their heads off like they'd lost a limb. At that point, all hell broke loose. The 4 drunk parents were yelling at everyone in general, and me in particular, for nearly letting their kids drown. And also because 2 of the kids had been videoing the trick using their parents' iPhones, which were now at the bottom of the pool. One of my brother-in-laws got into the pool to try to retrieve the phones, but his BMI and BAC made that impossible. No one else volunteered to help, unsurprising given that my sisters were still bitching at everyone. I told my sisters it was their job to watch their kids, and that if anything had happened to them, it would have been their responsibility, not mine. There were some pretty strong words on both sides. Wife and I left after the other brother-in-law fell over and face planted while yelling at us. Now they're saying I should have let the little craps knock me into the pool and have their fun, and ruin my phone. So, am I the butthole? Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Herobrine702. It says, "Not the butthole. People tried being butts to you. You avoided them." OP responded and said, "I realized they're just kids, and they were just having fun. The fact that they thought this was okay is more of a reflection of their parents than them. Just wish we hadn't gone. It's nice to see my folks and their neighbors, but I really don't like my sisters or their husbands. They don't hide their envy of us, and they're just exhausting to be around." Another commenter down below called Pokemon No More said, "Not the butthole. The kids effed around and found out. If the parents' phones got ruined in the process, that's on them for not controlling their little hellions. I can see why you avoid family get-togethers. Hopefully, next time, your wife won't allow herself to be guilted into making you go." OP responded to this one and said, "That's probably the one positive thing that will come out of this. Wife is much more tolerant and forgiving than I am towards my siblings. but based on what she was saying on the way home, I think she's had it with them as well. OP, I wouldn't blame you one bit if you never went to another get-together where your sisters and those kids were present. I can tell you from personal experience, when you go to a get-together and somebody isn't looking after their own kids and they expect everybody else to do it, it just sours the whole experience and you don't want to do it again. Alright, believe it or not, we have 8 updates for this one. Let's jump into update number 1. This update is titled, Update, Am I the Butthole for Jumping Out of the Way when my niece and nephew tried to push me into a pool, resulting in them falling in. First off, my folks tell me that my nieces and nephews are all good swimmers and that they use the pool all the time. The 7-year-old is still a beginner, but he loves the water. My sister just said they couldn't swim, so I'd look bad. To be fair, none of the kids are allowed in the deep end, which is where they fell in. It was the 2 10-year-olds and the 9-year-old who tried to push me into the pool. After we left, the party ended on a pretty sour note. My drunk brother-in-law, who face-planted while yelling at me, had to go to an urgent care place and get his face stitched up. He was too toasted to drive, so Dad took him. Dad was not very happy about this. Late that evening, my sister started a group text and said some really nasty crap. Their husbands threw in a few comments as well. Wife and I blocked the 4 of them. My mom called me. She was pretty upset about what they said. She and Dad were in the chat, and I don't blame her. Because of the text, my folks insisted my sisters and brother-in-laws come over the next day, Sunday, without their kids, to get some things straight and lay down some ground rules, Mom's wording. The result was a contrite if unenthusiastic apology from the siblings via my mom's phone. I'm glad my wife was with me when they called. Her hard stares kept me from saying what I wanted to. I just told them thanks and that we felt no need to discuss it further. Since I thought things were settled, I unblocked them. That evening, I got a text from one of the brother-in-laws telling me that the phones cost X thousand dollars and asking when I'd be paying for them. WTF? I replied, never. Took a screenshot of his text and forwarded it to my folks with a note that we were done with this nonsense. We are going no contact with the sisters and spouses and not to invite us to any more holidays or get-togethers if they'll be present. Then I blocked the sisters and their spouses again. At that point, the crap really hit the fan. Dad called them and ripped them a new one. Among other things, he told them the grandkids were not welcome at his place indefinitely. Since my mom regularly provides free babysitting, that got them pretty rattled. He also banned them from using the vacation house and told them my wife and I actually own it, not he and Mom. This completely freaked them out. Both of my sisters' families use the place a lot, including having their friends up for the weekend getaways. This was very much out of character for my folks. They'd clearly had it. And for reference, I never wanted my sisters to know we owned the place. We bought it for my folks. They always wanted a place in the mountains. Keeping the ownership quiet was just a way to avoid drama with my siblings. A couple of days later, my sisters and their husbands came to our place unannounced to apologize in person. We were out to dinner and they left a note. One sister also called me at work too. I sent her to voicemail. We've decided being no contact is the best thing for the indefinite future and haven't interacted with them for the last 3+ weeks. Personally, I'm done. They can go pound sand. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Random Internet Stranger. It says, they're just really sorry now because their free babysitting is gone and you own the cabin. Another commenter called Main Egg 320 said, they are only sorry because they are worried they will no longer have a vacation spot or free babysitting. I would keep them blocked and, as you said, tell them to go pound sand. OP responded to this one and said, it's been less than a month, but I have to say that blocking them has actually made our lives noticeably more peaceful. I hadn't realized how much ongoing low-level drama they create. It's not toxic, they're not bad people, they're just tiresome and petty. And I personally don't care about them using the weekend place. It's ours technically, but we bought it for my folks. They control it and decide who uses it when they aren't. We pay for all the operating costs and taxes. One good thing about this blow up is that we now know what we'll be doing with the property when my folks get older. I was prepared to take over managing it, allocating weekends, maintaining it and such, but now we know we'll just sell it. And if we want to go to the mountains, we'll just rent an Airbnb. I love how the apologies start flying out when the consequences of their actions start to rear their heads. OP, I completely don't blame you for going no contact, but I also kind of feel bad for your parents who are going to be in the middle going forward. Alright, let's get into OP's second update. This update is titled, Second Update. Well, it's been an interesting last few days. I thought the crap had hit the fan before, but it was more of a fart compared to what's happened this week. For this to make sense, I need to provide some financial context. My folks haven't ever been any good at saving money. I've been doing their taxes for years, so I know pretty much everything about them money-wise. Their house is paid for, and they have minimal debt, but they didn't save much for retirement. Both of them get Social Security, Dad gets a solid pension, and they have a bit of savings, but there's no treasure chest in the basement. I bought their current car for them after they retired, a retirement present so they could have something nice to drive. It was the first car in probably 20 years they didn't lease. My sisters are convinced the folks are dripping with money and that our parents will be leaving the two of them everything since I don't need more money. So they've never cared about saving either. Turns out my oldest sister and her husband, they have 3 kids, have been living beyond their means for some time and are in financial straits. They've maxed out their credit cards and are behind on their car leases to the point that one is about to get repossessed. He'd bragged in the past about making X per year, but it turns out to be about half that. She confessed all this to Mom on Tuesday because they need a loan and because, and this was a WTF moment for Mom and Dad, that for the last 3 years, instead of staying at the vacation house regularly, she's actually been renting it out once a month or so and pocketing the cash. We're talking $2,000 plus for a weekend and at least $4,000 for a week. With her being cut off from using the place, she's had to cancel one group already. She's now worried they'll lose everything. My folks aren't in any position to give them a loan. My other sister was aware of her renting out the place, but of course hasn't ever said anything. I suspect she's done the same thing as well, because I went up there once to drop off an ATV I'd worked on, and there was a family there who claimed to be staying there with my sister and her family, and that they'd gone to town for something. At the time, I let it go. I figured she'd loaned out the house to some friends, but I've always wondered. I found all this out through my folks who are pretty stressed out about it. Mom more than Dad. He's mainly just pissed off about it all. I know Dad feels betrayed, and I imagine he's embarrassed that he's in no position to help his daughter out. He did reiterate that as long as it's up to him, the girls won't be using the vacation home anytime soon. My folks let me know what's going on because they figured my sisters would put a full court press on me next. And they were right. On Thursday, my sisters came to our place again, without husbands this time, and waited outside the door until I got home. I had to choose between fighting with them in public, them making a scene if I went in without them, or letting them in, so I let them in. I got a BS story from the older sister, with the younger one backing her up regarding why I needed to let them use the mountain place again immediately. They also said I've been a crappy brother and that I needed to step up and plan on paying for their kids' college tuitions, since that's what family does. I let them pitch their story, then called them out based on what my folks had told me. Things went to crap from there. There was denial, crying, cursing, yelling, you name it. I swear my ears are still ringing 2 days later. Won't lie, I said some really mean and crappy things to them, but nothing that wasn't true. They finally left after about an hour. After that, I took a shower and laid down. When I got up, my wife was home, and her first words were that she'd had to block more phone numbers because my sisters were blowing up our phones from new ones. Folks messaged me yesterday asking me to call. I'm sure my sisters have told them some BS version of what happened, but I'm not up to rehashing it yet. I'm usually a pretty energetic person, but this drama has me beaten down. I had just enough energy today to drive up to the vacation house and padlock the entrance gate shut. I'm the only one with a key. I'm guessing that will be enough to ensure my siblings leave the place alone. They'd probably die trying to walk 400 yards uphill to get to the house. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Last Assignment 3672. It says, "Wow, your sisters are crappy people." The whole "because family" statement is such a cop-out for crappy people. They believe it allows them the ability to treat you badly and still ask for money and help. I'm not sure what your parents want to talk about. However, if I were you, I would not help your sister out money-wise. I think they need to hit rock bottom to jar them enough to pull their heads out of their own butts. The fantasy world they live in does not exist, and it's about time for them to realize that. Hopefully, your parents don't try and press you to assist. I think that would just enable your sister and her family to continue to live beyond their means. Honestly, if you were to give your sister money, you can expect to never see it again. Just reading all of your posts has made me tired. Haha. I hope for your sake that things start to slow down. Okay, what I'm wondering on this one is if the parents knew that the place was being rented out by the sisters and they weren't telling OP either. That one makes you think. They've been pocketing a lot of money off of this place and now they're losing it all, and they completely deserve it. Alright, let's jump into update number 3. This one is titled Update Number 3. September 12th, 2023. Yet another update regarding the cluster F that is my extended family. Thought it might be time given what's gone on over the past 2 weeks. After my sisters came to my place, my mom and dad told me they were done with managing the vacation home. Sounded like the sisters had been pressuring them to let them use the place again. Basically, my folks handed the responsibility for the place over to me and told me it was my problem from here on out. Up until then, they'd kept track of who would be using it when, and they'd taken care of routine maintenance, replacing worn out items, etc. In any case, they decided they didn't want to be in the middle of all this crap. While I don't blame them, I'm disappointed because the darn place was supposed to be something for them to enjoy and hang out in, and they use it regularly. Plus, I've never cared that they let my sisters and their families use it, because I've always thought that was my parents' call, even though I technically own it. But now, my folks are going to be in the position of not having access without me being involved, and that changes the whole dynamic of the place. I've taken several steps to secure the place. I already mentioned that I locked the gate. It has a heavy-duty chain and the best lock I could find. I also did a full reset on all the door keypads and created all new codes. Security cameras got installed yesterday, which is actually pretty cool, because the installer convinced me to put in a high-res one that looks out over the valley. The system cost me way more than I thought it would, but the peace of mind is worth it. The installer also put up signs on the property saying the place was monitored by video. I also installed a heavy-duty lockout for the water shutoff and drain valve. I hope to heck I don't lose the keys for it, because if I do, it's going to be a bear to try to remove. Haven't told anyone but my wife that the water is locked off, and again, only we have the keys. Last week, I got separate calls at my office from both of the husbands trying to convince me to let them use the house like they always have. The older one had gone up with some friends for a guy's hangout, but couldn't get in because of the gate lock. He was pretty pissed and embarrassed about being locked out. I'm sure he would have broken the lock if he could have. During his call, he kept bouncing between pushy and victimhood. At one point, he threatened to rip that gate out of the gosh darn ground. He also admitted they'd been renting it out to a few friends, and they needed the money. I was ruining their business, and that I should refund their guests money. Me? F that. I should have recorded the conversation with him, but I don't know how to do that from an office phone anyway. The other brother-in-law just sounded like he was being made to call by my sister. He didn't really put up a fight when I told him not to plan on ever using the place again. In any case, I told them they can't use the place and not to ask again. At this point, I'm considering selling the vacation home. Wife and I won't use it enough to justify keeping it, and it's not like there's going to be any family get-togethers there anytime soon. I mentioned selling it to my folks, Their response was pretty much whatever. I'd more than double my money by selling it. The place consists of 3 lots with killer views and is at the end of a private road. But I'll probably wait for a while to sell. Doing so now would be an emotional decision. My sisters and I aren't currently speaking, and I have no plans to initiate contact. I don't know what the status between them and my folks is, and I don't want to. On the upside, we spent an evening with my folks last week, went to a new restaurant that was nice. No one brought up any of this crap. Mom did update us on the nieces and nephews. She's spending time with them at their homes. Sorry this update isn't full of laughs or owns. That's just life sometimes. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called NegativeBottle776. It says, "Thank you so much for the update. I'll advise you to check with your advisor if renting your property would be worthwhile. After all these improvements, a conscious-minded renter might give you a good buck for a month or year rental. Selling now, as you said, may not be in your best interest. About your pushy brother-in-law, I'll ask my lawyer to draft a letter of intent to sue for the profits from the rentals. Also, include a charge of misuse and any property loss or destroyed. Maybe do it for both. This will stop any further attempts, as they seem very entitled to your property and money. Good luck, update us if you can or need more ideas." OP responded to this one and said, "I agree that my sisters and their families are very entitled. They're also in an extremely weak position in all of this. The place is a bit remote to rent as a long-term home. Plus, there are times during the winter the road is impassable, so staying there year-round is pretty iffy. There are a couple of permanent residents on the road who are at a lower elevation and relatively close to the year-round public road, but even they have to hunker down or bug out a few times each winter. Regarding making it a vacation rental, doing so would be seen by my sisters as rubbing salt in the wound and would give them a reason to create more drama. And honestly, we don't need the money. The place is paid for, it's in great shape, it doesn't cost much to keep the lights on, etc. I did think about lawyering up and covering them with paper. It wouldn't even cost me much. A good friend is a property law attorney. But again, doing so would escalate things and give them reason to create family drama. My primary goal at this point is to minimize my involvement with them and minimize any nonsense that causes my parents stress. I'm willing to take some short-term flack and absorb some expenses, like the camera system, to keep things contained. It could blow up again, but I suppose I'll drive off that bridge when I come to it. I don't think we'll sell right away, if at all. It's more of a last resort personal fantasy thought than anything else. There's a good chance that come holiday season, my folks will reset and want to have the entire family there, which is fine. We won't be going, of course, but I don't care if my parents have guests there. I intend to keep control of the place for the indefinite future though, which will be inconvenient at times because I'll be the only person with a gate key, but I can live with that. OP, you're showing how much of a great person you are here, and I know if your parents wanted to use the place again, you'd go right on out there and unlock that gate for them in a heartbeat. I can't help but feel bad for the parents again though, because they gave up the place that they could go and get away from everything, and that meant getting away from all the family drama too. Alright, let's jump into update number 4. This one is titled Update Number 4, October 16th, 2023. A couple of people have asked for an update, here you go. I hired a guy to manage and look over the vacation home. He lives in the area, takes care of his folks, and manages a good number of properties. Some are vacation rentals, some are weekend places like ours. He has access to my camera feeds and does a physical check on the place every week or two. I think he may have the best job in the mountains. He gets paid to drive around with his dog, walk around the properties, and hangs out on people's decks whenever he feels like it. He also has a camera feed from a house near the start of the private road that takes still shots whenever a vehicle goes past it. $450 per month, plus he'll do basic maintenance and repairs on an hourly basis. He's friends with all of the sheriff's deputies too. Got a lot of peace of mind from doing this, and he sends photos from his walks to everyone once or twice a week. I have to brag a bit on my parents. I got all of this from them tonight at dinner. They were getting pressure from my sisters to demand that I open up the vacation house to everyone for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving up there had become quite the tradition for the family. Not for me or my wife, we've gone once in 7 years. My dad refused to bother me about it because he knew I'd say no. They came up with what I think is a great plan. Announced that they were organizing the Thanksgiving gathering, and if everyone split the cost in advance, they'd rent an Airbnb in the mountains. Otherwise, they'd host Thanksgiving at their place or one of the sisters could host it. This caused a fight between the sisters because the middle sister was all for doing the Airbnb, but the oldest one doesn't have any money. The deadline to commit to the Airbnb has passed. Looks like Thanksgiving will be at my parents' place. Regardless, we won't be there. My parents have asked that we not sell the place for now. They decided they'd still like to use it occasionally, but not until my sisters have come to terms with the new normal. And of course, they'd probably like it if everyone could get together there again down the road, but that's just not going to happen. I'd just as soon sell it and move on at this point, but I can live with keeping it so my folks can use it now and again. Plus, it will be worth even more down the road. Wife and I have stayed no contact with my sisters and their husbands. Both sisters have called from new numbers, F you Google Voice, and left messages insisting that I meet with them for our parents' sake to work out how everyone can use the family vacation home. They called my wife too. I'm glad I was already in the habit of not answering calls if I don't recognize the number. I honestly don't know if they're delusional or if they think they can bully me into giving them access again. I don't really care. My parents tell me that the oldest sister and her husband are getting out of the leases for their SUV and big truck and are selling their jet skis and some other crap they've never needed. That's going to be really hard on her. She's quite the braggart and won't like being seen in something older, smaller, and cheaper. My brother-in-law's identity is very much wrapped up with his truck as well. He even has a small tattoo of the truck's company logo, which frankly is one of the many reasons why he and I never hung out. Several people have suggested I make the vacation home into an Airbnb. I don't plan to do so, at least anytime soon. I know it would make money, but it would cause an incredible amount of drama across the family and would stress out my parents. They don't need that. It would also be a hassle to remove personal things my folks have there. That stuff has nowhere to go. And there would be wear and tear on the place. And I'm sure it would take some amount of time on my part, even though I'd use a manager to do it, just not worth it to me. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called 73Shay. It says, "Thanks for the update, OP. I find it quite hilarious that your sister still can't handle the fact that it's your vacation home. That they went as far as to dub it the family vacation home and use your parents again for sympathy. They need to learn humility." OP responded to this one and said, "Yep, that line killed me. And they both used it in separate voicemails. They're trying hard to find any crack in my armor. Kind of curious as to what they'll try next, which will probably happen soon because another tradition is to meet up there right after Christmas for a few days. Sometimes for several days, including New Year's. I'm pretty pleased that my dad has been firm with them on all this. I've rarely seen him be this way. His nature is gregarious, friendly, good at getting people to cooperate, that sort of thing. He's also told me that he likes not feeling responsible for the place anymore. Well, OP, one solution you have here is to get the paperwork drawn up that you're going to sue them for all the money they made renting out your property without your permission. Then you send it to both of them with a note saying, "If you keep talking about the house, I'm going to file this. Leave us alone." Alright, let's jump into update number 5. This update is titled Update Number 5, Crap. November 27th, 2023. Wrote most of this yesterday, but decided to wait to post it until I wasn't so wound up. Waiting didn't work, I'm still wound up. Sorry if this rambles, so much has happened, hard to write coherently. Things have gone to hell. I really, truly did not think anything like this would happen. Short version, my brothers-in-law broke into my vacation home and were arrested. They've been charged with breaking and entering, destruction of property, and communicating threats, all Class 1 misdemeanors. I've refused to drop the charges. I might do so if I'm fully paid for the damage they caused. They were still in jail as of Saturday evening. I assume they're out by now. Things had settled down, at least I thought so. Haven't seen or heard from my sisters in over 6 weeks. My parents went up to the house for a week and had a good time. David, the property manager I hired, has worked out great. He's done a couple of repairs I asked him to do, and I've given him a list that he's going to work on. He usually sends a photo or two of wildlife or a sunset to his clients every week. Was kind of making me want to get up there. Friday after Thanksgiving, my brother-in-laws went to my vacation home. They used an angle grinder to cut through the chain on the driveway gate and damaged the gate in the process. They tried to get in through the front door, ruined the lock set, and gouged the door badly. They finally got in through the utility floor door and a locked internal door. They also broke into the barn. I'm not sure why. When they went out through the front door, they were met by sheriff's deputies and David. David gets notifications from the camera system when there's activity. He saw what was going on and called the sheriff's department. According to David, the brother-in-laws tried to BS their way out of it, but the deputies didn't buy it. Breaking into an empty house is a pretty serious thing up there. It's usually meth heads who ransack the place and hawk everything. When the brother-in-laws were arrested, they freaked out big time. Were saying how they were going to beat the heck out of me, etc. Not smart to do in front of cops. David and the sheriff's office tried calling my wife and me to see what we wanted to do, but we were spending the day with her parents and had left our phones in the car so we could be in vacation mode. So they booked the brother-in-laws on everything, which is what I would have asked them to do anyway. Brother-in-laws called their wives from jail, who of course freaked out. They called my folks, tried to call me, but they're blocked. Tried to find a lawyer up there to arrange bail. Not easy to do given that it's a rural area and it was a holiday weekend. Older sister has zero cash and her cards are maxed out, so if they made bail, my middle sister would have had to pay for both husbands. I know they were still in jail as of Saturday afternoon. We didn't check our phones until late Friday on the way home from the in-laws. There were a ton of calls and messages from my mom, dad, David, and the sheriff's department. Talk about ruining a great day. I was in such a good mood till I looked at my phone. My wife read through the text and listened to the messages, read them out to me, and by the time we got home, I had some idea of what was going on. I put my brain back into thinking mode, tried to get past my anger, failed, called David, and got the rundown on what had happened and how bad the damage was, resulting in more anger. I ended Friday by calling the sheriff's department and telling them there was no misunderstanding. The brother-in-laws had absolutely no right to be on my property, and I wanted to press charges. I didn't call my folks back, barely slept. I waited until Saturday afternoon to call my folks. They were both pretty rattled about it all, my mom in particular. My sisters had browbeat them into telling me I should tell the cops it was all a mistake and that I wanted the charges dropped. I flat out refused, told them there was no way I'd do that until I spoke with an attorney, and also not until I was paid in full for whatever it will cost to fix everything 100%. My mom was crying hard by the time we got off the phone, which of course made me feel like crap. My dad suggested it was time for a complete start over, but also said he thought they needed to pay for the damage. I haven't gone up to the property yet. There's nothing I can do, and I'll probably go nuts when I see the damage in person. The photos are bad enough. I'm hoping to tomorrow or Wednesday, but my job isn't one I can just wander off from for non-emergencies. I've left messages with 2 attorney friends asking them to recommend the right lawyer or lawyers to go after my sisters and brother-in-laws. I don't know what I can do exactly, but I'm hoping to get restraining orders. I have all the texts they've sent me, that might help. I'm strongly considering suing them for the money they made renting the place. I don't care about the cash, but it will help make them as miserable as possible. The gloves are definitely off at this point. A couple of side notes. Brother-in-laws had no idea I'd hired someone to keep an eye on things, or that there are cameras now. My parents knew, but hadn't told them, because they knew it would just give my sisters a reason to drama up. There are signs on the property stating it is being monitored with cameras and no trespassing signs though. My wife has completely had it at this point. I don't blame her. She's been more than patient about all of it, but she reached her limit and was not shy about letting me know. She told me it's up to me how I deal with this, but that she thought they all needed to be taught a hard lesson. Older brother-in-law likely won't face any repercussions at his job over this, but middle brother-in-law has a security clearance, so he might. I'm hoping that will be motivation for middle brother-in-law to pay for the damages himself immediately. David, the caretaker, has an interesting background. I knew he was friends with some of the deputies, figured it was because they were all locals. I was wrong. He was a cop in a big city for years, was shot on duty, and afterwards decided to quit and move to where his parents had retired. He has some PTSD over it all. His dog is a certified service animal and is usually with him. I know law enforcement people tend to hang together. I guess that's how they became his friend group. I don't want to see or speak with these buttholes for the rest of my life. I know this is in direct conflict with my overwhelming urge to make their lives as miserable as possible. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called The Idle Gamer. It says, "Sorry this happened to you, pal. Crappy situation all around. But if you want a complete stranger's opinion on Reddit, I agree with your wife. Seems like they won't take the hints. So a lesson will have to be learned here. I know it will be a hard thing to have to go through family-wise. Your sisters will get on at your parents, and then that will get fed down to you. But your mom and dad bearing the weight of this isn't on. It's not their problem, nor yours. Your sisters and brother-in-laws made their bed, and now they have to lie in it. Do you know why they even broke into the house yet? Was it just to prove a point? Some drunken plan they made? Or were they going to steal and mess the place up? Sending best wishes from across the pond, you'll get through this." Opie responded to this one and said, "A lot of people have said I should have been hard butt about all of this from day one. I've avoided it because it would have stressed out my parents, and I hate this kind of drama. But F it, they're stressed out now. My wife has pretty much opted out of any more to do with this, doesn't want to hear about it for a while, and says it's in my lap. She'll ease off on that, but I'm guessing she's not going to get involved from now on, other than listening to me blow off steam. Regarding why they broke in, conjecture on my part, but I think they were planning on using it for family getaways and or renting it out again. According to David, the property manager, it's deer season through the end of the year. I know the brother-in-laws have used it in the past as base camp for big group hunting weeks. It sleeps quite a few people, so one event with friends could net them thousands of dollars. Again, I'm guessing here, but that would explain why they broke into the barn as well. I bought a 6-seater mule a few years back, and they would want to use that. I don't think they wanted to trash the place. It means too much to my dad, and they both like him a lot. OP, even if they pay for the damages, you really need to let these charges go through. It's the only thing that's going to teach them a lesson. They've basically told you how much they respect you by breaking into your home. You can show them how much you respect them by letting the charges go through. Let's jump into OP's update number 6. This update is titled Update Number 6, December 2nd, 2023, Saturday. Didn't think I'd be doing another post this soon, but a lot has happened over the past 2 days. Short version, I think the corner has been turned on this crap. Thursday afternoon, I got a courier delivered envelope in my office. In it was a signed letter from both my brothers-in-law and a cashier's check for $5,000. In the letter, they made what I have to say was a really sincere apology. Among other things, they acknowledged breaking in, acknowledged it was wrong, said the $5,000 was to pay for the damage and that they'd pay more if it cost more than that. Also said they'd stay away from the vacation home unless my wife and I specifically invited them. They also asked that I do what I could to get the charges dropped as soon as possible, because they could both lose their jobs, and that they'd agree to a restraining order or whatever else it took for that to happen. There was more as well, all conciliatory, but that's the gist of it. To say this was a shock is an understatement. It was obviously a total 180 from their past behavior. I'd already made an appointment with an attorney to see about suing my brother-in-laws over the damage and to try to get a restraining order. I called him and told him what I'd just received, and he agreed to meet with me at the end of the day instead of next week, told me not to deposit the check. We met for about 2 hours. He ended up recommending the wife and I do a settlement and mutual release agreement with all 4 of them, sisters and brother-in-laws. He said if we went after them via a lawsuit, that we'd almost certainly win, but that it could take 2 years or more. There would be sizable upfront legal fees, and that we might never see any money. He also said we could keep the $5,000 free and clear even if we didn't let them off the hook. He's drawing up the agreement. It won't be ready until Monday. The agreement will include what's essentially the civil equivalent of a restraining order. I'd already asked my property manager to work up a bid to get the damage repaired. I called him after the meeting and asked that he get me as close an estimate as possible ASAP. Got that Friday. He thinks it will take around $4,000 to fix everything. Most of that is for the front door. On Friday, my attorney contacted each of the brother-in-laws, told them what we were proposing, and advised them to get their own lawyers. They both agreed to it. The middle brother-in-law told him they could afford to either pay for the damages or pay for a lawyer, but not both, and they figured a lawyer wouldn't make any difference given that they really had no defense for what they did. His biggest concern was if the charges could be dropped. From what I can tell, they're willing to do anything and sign anything to make this all go away. My attorney also called the DA's office on Friday to discuss dismissing the charges, got the name of the prosecutor, and left them a message, but has not spoken to them yet. He thinks they'll dismiss the charges because the brother-in-laws are paying up and they have no priors. But then again, he's not a criminal lawyer. Also said I should be prepared to drive up there Monday or Tuesday and tell the prosecutor in person that I want everything dismissed. He's also advised me to continue to be no contact with sisters and brother-in-laws, especially for the next 6 months, and that it will be really important to follow the terms of the agreement when it comes to future interactions with them. I'm guessing that the brother-in-law's change of heart is due to them having figured out what's at stake for them, what it's going to cost them in legal fees and fines and so on. There's also the highly unlikely possibility that they could go to jail for up to 120 days, and as I've mentioned, one of them has a security clearance for his job that could be at risk. So this is their Hail Mary pass to keep their normal lives. This isn't a perfect resolution to the situation, but at least it will get me past the legal and financial parts of the crap show that I've been in for the past few months. I doubt I'll ever have a civil relationship with any of them ever again, and that's fine. What I want most at this point is to close this off, get on with my life, and never speak to any of them again. I'm exhausted from this. Wife feels pretty much the same way. Kind of a side issue, but getting the written apology was, weirdly, a huge moment for me. I wasn't expecting that ever, but apparently it matters to me quite a bit. The money doesn't feel particularly important at this moment. I'll darn sure take it though. Also, I'm pretty certain my middle sister and her husband came up with the money. The cashier's check is from the credit union of the company he works for. Once things are signed, I plan to make one more update, probably just an edit to this post. I'm sorry for being so pedantic. Writing these posts has helped clear my head, and the feedback has really helped. I truly appreciate everyone's comments, insight, and support, and I really, really hope none of you ever have to go through this kind of nonsense. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Unwanted88. It says, "This update is a massive improvement. Make sure that they cannot contact you unless it is through your lawyers also. They effed around and found out, and now they're willing to do anything. Make sure your parents are in the loop about the proceedings also. That may help some overzealous, entitled behavior in the long run with your sisters. Sincerely, OP, your saga is incredibly difficult to deal with, and you are doing it like a champ. You and your wife are incredibly affected by this nonsense, and you both deserve to be done with this. But keep us informed, we are all rooting for you." OP responded to this one and said, "Thanks for your kind words. To be honest, when I finally got home Thursday night, I cried from relief thinking this might be all over. I'm not going to discuss the settlement with my folks until it's signed by everyone. My sisters, brother-in-laws can if they want to, but I'm not. It's between me and them. That apology came from way out in left field, but I'm willing to bet there was somebody from the legal profession on the brother-in-law's end saying, you need to make this better, otherwise you're pretty much going to lose everything. That kind of makes me wonder just how sincere the apology is, especially since OP says they weren't expecting one from them at all, because that's not the kind of people that they are. Alright, let's get into OP's update number 7. This one is titled Update 7 Final, I Hope. December 7th, 2023, Thursday. Thursday morning, I met with my attorney, went over the agreement, changed a couple of minor things, and he sent it to my sisters and brothers-in-law. It included a requirement that they pay my attorney's fee about $3,000. They weren't happy about that and tried to negotiate it away, but he told them they either accept it as is or there would be no deal at all, and we'd proceed with suing them for the money they got from renting out the place, wear and tear from renting it, repair costs from their break-in, emotional distress, lost income from having to deal with this, attorney fees, and whatever else we could. He also told them I would push hard with the DA's office to prosecute every charge. Short version, they came in and signed. I wasn't there. I'm told it was a pretty tense environment, that the middle brother-in-law appeared to have taken charge, and that at one point, he told both of my sisters to shut the heck up, or he was walking away from the whole thing, making his own deal with us, and the rest of them could all go to hell. They provided another cashier's check for $2,500, claimed that's all they had. It's close enough that we're going to accept it as the final payment. Attorney also told me that everyone was very cold and curt towards one another, but that they all managed to keep it together long enough to sign and left without making too big of a scene. I drove up to the vacation house early yesterday to check out the damage and meet with the DA's office. Seeing the damage made my blood boil. It was so senseless. I was so pissed that I was ready to eat the cost of repairs and do everything I could to ruin their lives. Tried walking it off, failed utterly. Ended up calling a good friend who was kind enough to stay on the phone for over an hour letting me spew and vent. He eventually got me back to focusing on the bigger picture of putting this behind me and getting on with my life. Honestly, I'm still not sure that's what I want to do, but I settled down enough to get some food in me and I felt better. After lunch, I went to the DA's office. Hadn't made an appointment and had to wait a while, but got to meet with the assistant DA who's got the case. Short version is that since I don't want to prosecute and brother-in-laws have already paid for the damages, that they are willing to drop all the charges except trespassing, which in this case will be a Class 2 misdemeanor. The brother-in-laws will have to plead guilty and pay whatever fine the judge sets. I'm also told that if they fight the trespassing charge or ever so much as fart in public up there, that it would go very poorly for them. It helped that the brother-in-laws didn't resist arrest. If they had, none of the charges would have been dropped. I also went by the sheriff's office to thank them for getting there so quickly and everything. Wanted to thank the deputies personally, but only spoke to the dispatch person. And I tried to meet up with David, the property manager, but couldn't get a hold of him. A couple of notes, the agreement includes a no contact clause. Basically, if any of them show up where my wife or I are, or the other way around, whoever got there last has to leave immediately. No contact except through attorneys or other mutually agreed upon third parties. They get to keep whatever they made from renting the vacation house, my big give, unless I have tax consequences, which they will be responsible for. And we release each other from all liabilities up through the present. There's more to it than that, but those are the high points. Wife and I will sign the agreement later today. After that, I can't talk about most of this, but I can talk around it. I think this is my final update regarding all this nonsense, but I'll respond to comments if I can. As I've said before, posting about all of this and reading folks' thoughts and responses has been really helpful and has probably been key in my being able to handle this in a relatively healthy way. So, thank you all again. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called FreeComb8184. It says, I have been following your story from the start and can't believe how this all turned out. Your sisters and their husbands basically destroyed your family over their selfishness and pettiness. I feel for your parents as they are now caught in the middle and can never have their family together again for anything because of their daughters and spouses being so selfish. I will say you are better than me because I would not have dropped the charges or made the agreement you did. They would have been sued by me, especially after finding out they rented your vacation home without permission or considering the legality of it. I am usually a forgive and forget type of person, but this went way too far for that. I'm glad the legal aspect of the situation is starting to get behind, but unfortunately, this will never end due to the family dynamics it has created. I hope your parents stay understanding with you and your wife in this situation, as they have been in your previous updates. Best of luck to you, and I hope for you and your wife's sanity that this is coming to a close. OP responded to this one and said, "Thanks for the kind words. I had a hard time not being vindictive, but right now, I'm glad I wasn't. If they cause more drama down the road, I'll probably regret it, but if they follow the agreement, that won't happen. The family dynamics are, like you said, pretty much effed. I've only told my parents that we're trying to work things out, nothing more. They may or may not be okay with the way things will be moving forward, but I had to do what was best for my wife and I. I'm guessing that my sisters have told them a very slanted version, and that's just one more turd I'll have to swim around. Really, the agreement is more of a formalization of how things have been for the last few months. I know it's not how my folks wanted things to go, but I'm pretty happy with it." Another commenter down below called Tony164 said, "Did your sisters ever show this level of entitlement or stupidity before?" OP responded and said, "Not really. Not towards me anyway. We used to be okay. Never very close, but not enemies. Looking back, they started to resent me when I bought a loft when I was 25. At that point, neither of them owned a home, but both had met their future husbands. They definitely didn't like that I got a place before they did. It got worse when I met my wife. They didn't like that she was part of a wealthy family, especially since I was doing pretty well by myself then. Accused me of being elitist and such. When we got married, I moved in with my wife. Her condo was close to where she was doing her fellowship, and I sold the loft. Our wedding was fancy but reasonable, but the sisters were definitely envious about it. After that, they and their husbands got pretty petty, and we started minimizing our involvement with them. The profit from selling the loft, being frugal, and not having a house payment are what enabled me to buy the vacation home for my parents. My folks were okay with hiding the fact that I owned it instead of them, because they knew my sisters would be bitchy about it and say that I was using my wife's money. I didn't. Most of our finances are separate, though it definitely helped that I didn't have a house payment. Up until this crap started, I actually thought we were okay in the general sense. Our daily lives were, and are, very different, and I can't pretend I enjoy being around them for more than half a day. But I didn't think they hated me. I did know that both sisters had become pretty spoiled and entitled, but it wasn't my concern. And I didn't have any real conflicts with my brothers-in-law either, just almost nothing in common with them. I guess that's a long-winded way of saying I didn't know they were all such buttholes. Obviously there was tension between OP, the sisters, and the brother-in-law beforehand, but I want to remind everybody that the tipping point for this whole thing was a couple of kids going into a pool. How crazy is it how far this has escalated? Let's see if we can tie this up with update number 8. This update is titled March 2024, Oldest Sister and Brother-in-Law Have Filed for Bankruptcy. Thought it would be worth an update for anyone who's interested. Unsurprisingly, my oldest sister and brother-in-law have filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. While I don't care about what happens to them financially or otherwise, they've also managed to drag my parents into their mess, which I'm not happy about. At the start of the year, my brother-in-law's oversized custom Pride and Joy truck was repossessed. Pretty embarrassing for him, I'm sure. Happened at work. This was their breaking point. Without the truck, they'd have to share a Kia my parents loaned them, and they can barely fit in it with their 3 kids. Financially, they are effed. They owe at least $125,000, probably more, on high-interest credit cards. They have zero equity in their house, and have a couple of personal loans that I'm pretty certain they got under false pretenses. They have loans on their jet skis, ATVs, and trailers. They also owe a chunk of money from defaulting on the truck lease. They hadn't made any payments on their credit cards or loans in months, and were behind on their house payments as well. They got out of the lease on my sister's massive SUV late last year. They were upside down on it as well, so had to come up with cash to do so. They also had to pay an attorney, the fine, and court costs for my brother-in-law's trespassing charge at the vacation house. And they owe my middle sister and her husband money for bail and their portion of the damages to the place. As I've mentioned before, my folks have never been financial wizards, but they have at least been generally responsible. They're retired, their home is paid off, and they live off Social Security and pensions. Altogether, they get more than they spend. Minimal savings, just an emergency fund. Turns out, my folks emptied out that fund, cashed out their small IRA, $20,000, and gave it to my sister. That let her catch up on the house payment and cover the negative equity on their car lease. But now, literally every bit of savings my parents possessed is gone. Plus, my parents have been paying for their groceries for several months and continue to pay the insurance on the car they loaned my sister. According to my dad, my sisters worked my mom for weeks to get her to fork over the money. They'd worked on both my folks at the same time for a while, but my dad flat out refused every time. Eventually, Mom caved. She was worried that my sister would have to move to a hovel in some backwater town and that the kids would be barefoot and eating dirt. Dad's not happy about it, and to say there's some tension between them right now is an understatement, but they'll be fine. I was pretty disappointed when my parents told me all this, but I wasn't surprised. It sucks that they emptied out their savings to help, but I kinda get it. The way the bankruptcy laws are in our state, by getting caught up on the home loan, my sister should be able to keep the house. I tried hard not to say how I felt about this and my sisters, mostly succeeded. Really, I'm way more pissed about this than I should be. The worst part for me is that my sister and brother-in-law could now contact me and my wife without any real fear of repercussions. The only penalty the no contact agreement has is that if they violate it, we can go after them for the money they made from renting out the vacation house and related damages. Since they filed for bankruptcy, that's now not an impediment for them. I'm hoping they'll leave us alone, but who knows. Folks also told me that my middle sister and her husband have hit a rough spot and that he's not currently living with her and the kids. Just a guess, but I imagine he's had it with the whole family dynamic that caused this nonsense. Not directly related, but on a brighter note, I've spent 2 weekends at the mountain house since the start of the year, once with my wife and once alone. Both times there was a lot of snow. It was incredibly beautiful and relaxing, very therapeutic. The place also has good internet service now, thanks Starlink, which is nice. Plus, knowing that I can count on David, the property manager, to keep the place in shape and ready for us to visit and help if we get snowed in, eliminates most of the stress in owning it. My folks have used it a few times as well and get along great with David. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Stray's Mom. It says, "Well, karma seems to be catching up with the wannabe Jones. I'm really sorry that your sisters grifted your parents out of their savings. Unfortunately, they are adults and chose to cave to their daughters. Can you still get an RO for harassment with your older sister and brother-in-law? They might not be bound by the signed agreement, but if they are calling, texting, or emailing you, and you don't want the contact, that might be enough to get an RO. Especially since there is already a record of brother-in-law's actions. I feel bad for you that your crazy sisters are continuing to cause mischief. Even if it isn't directly on you, it's still affecting you." OP responded to this one and said, "If they start up again, I do indeed plan to get a restraining order. In fact, my wife made it clear to me she expects a very hard approach to any BS from them going forward." Which I agree with, of course. I had the security cameras at our house upgraded at the start of the year, just in case they came by. I also kept all their previous texts and provided screenshots to my attorney for safekeeping. If they cause any trouble at the vacation house, they're toast. The sheriff's department and DA office have the full story and are sympathetic to our situation. Another commenter down below called SwissMiss77 said, "Jesus, not paying the mortgage but letting the truck get repoed? They should have sold it or given it back first and they should have given up all the toys months ago. Instead, they just kept doubling and tripling down. Absolute insane levels of entitlement and delusion. OP responded to this one and said, "To be fair, and this is according to my parents, they tried to sell the ATVs and watercraft, but the value on those things dropped like a rock the moment you buy them, and they were upside down on the loans, so they eventually just quit paying on them." Also, this reminds me, when they broke into the vacation house, they also broke into the mini barn. Turns out my older brother-in-law had stowed his 2 ATVs in it. Just guessing, but I think he was going to take them, report them stolen, get an insurance settlement, and sell them on the sly. I found out in January that the ATVs were there and paid to have them taken to my dad's place. He had my brother-in-law pick them up from there. Also, I don't think my brother-in-law was expecting the truck to get repoed. I think he was working to catch up on the payments so they'd have one good vehicle. The finance company must have just run out of patience. Don't blame them, he's an F-up. One more comment from a user called HappyConnection5509 says, "They must have been making quite a packet from their fraudulent vacation home income for it to impact their finances to this extent." OP responded and said, "I think they were grossing at least $50,000 per year, probably more. Tax-free. It was never listed on Airbnb as far as I can tell. They'd rent to friends, friends of friends, etc. I based the $50,000 on the fact that my parents kept a calendar for the house to keep track of who was using the place. I went through the last 3 years worth of calendars, and my sisters were using the place a lot, sometimes for a week at a time. Supposedly, they were doing school-related planning retreats as well as just family time. I know similar places go for $2,000 or more per weekend, and at least $4,000 for a week. It can sleep 6 people in bedrooms and has a bunk room for kids that all 5 would stay in. Plus, it has 2 queen-size pull-out sofas. If you pushed it, you could fit more people than that. I think my sisters are just spendaholics. They constantly have the newest whatever. iPads, TVs, clothes, diets, you name it. So no matter how much they got, they'd spend more. So this was going to happen eventually. I don't think I've ever been as disappointed with an outcome as I am with this one. I feel so bad for OP's parents. I thought that the sisters and brother-in-law might have been turning a corner and things might be going the right way, but then they cleaned out the parents' financials as well. Wow. I know some of that needs to be put on the parents because they're the ones that gave the money, but come on, they're parents, these are their kids, and they don't want to see them on the streets. I'm just really disappointed that the sister went to the parents in the first place. This has been an epic tale, and I don't think it's over yet. I'll keep my eye out for more updates, and I'll let you guys know if any more pop up. If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to your favorites on whatever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. Also, if you're on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.